The U-East meridian dropped through the purple clouds of Kepler 442c like a silver needle threading through silk. Lieutenant Jake Morrison watched the alien landscape unfold beneath them through the bridge viewport. Massive crystal formations jutted from the ground like frozen lightning, their surfaces catching and reflecting the light of the twin suns above. "Landing sequence initiated," announced Ben Rodriguez from the communication station. His fingers danced across the holographic controls as he coordinated with the ship's navigation system. "Dr. Carter, are you getting clean readings on the atmosphere?" Dr. Lisa Carter looked up from her scientific instruments, tucking a strand of brown hair behind her ear. "All green across the board. The air is breathable for humans, though it has a higher oxygen content than Earth. We might feel a bit lightheaded." At first, Alex Thompson, the mission security chief, checked his weapon systems one final time. "Any signs of hostile activity?" "Negative," Jake replied, his eyes still fixed on the approaching surface. "The Zephyrians sent us coordinates for a safe landing zone. According to their transmissions, they're as curious about us as we are about them." The ship touched down in a clearing surrounded by those impossible crystal trees. The moment the engines powered down, Jake felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. This was humanity's first official contact with the Zephyrian civilization. Everything they did here would shape relations between their species for generations to come. "Remember the briefing," Jake said as they prepared to disembark. "The Zephyrians communicate through a combination of sound and light patterns. Our universal translators should handle most of it, but be patient if there are misunderstandings." The airlock hissed open, and Jake stepped onto alien soil for the first time in his career. The ground beneath his boots felt solid, despite being made entirely of some kind of crystalline material. The air tasted clean and sharp, with a faint metallic tang that reminded him of mountain springs back on Earth. Delegation of Zephyrians waited for them near a grove of smaller crystal formations. Jake's breath caught in his throat at the sight of them. The aliens were tall and graceful, their bodies seeming to be made of living light. Their skin was translucent, revealing flowing patterns of blue and white energy beneath. They moved like dancers, each gesture fluid and purposeful. The leader of the group stepped forward. Light patterns danced across his form as he spoke, and Jake's translator rendered his words in a melodious male voice. "Greetings, humans from the distant star. I am High Curator Lithion. We welcome you to our world." Jake bowed slightly, a gesture he hoped would be understood as respectful. "Thank you for receiving us, High Curator. I am Lieutenant Jake Morrison, representing the United Earth Space Command. We come in peace, seeking friendship and understanding between our peoples." The formal pleasantries continued for several minutes. Dr. Carter presented gifts from Earth, crystalline formations from their own world that seemed to fascinate the Zephyrians. Ben Rodriguez worked to establish better communication protocols, while Alex Thompson remained alert but tried to appear non-threatening. Jake was beginning to think this might be the smoothest first contact in human history when everything changed. Commotion erupted from the direction of the Crystal City. Zephyrians scattered like startled birds, their light patterns flashing in what Jake's translator identified as alarm and fear. Through the chaos, a lone figure approached. This Zephyrian was different from the others, where they glowed with soft blues and whites. This one radiated deep purples and blacks. Her form was more solid, more defined than her people. She moved with purpose, but also with obvious reluctance, as if she knew her presence would cause trouble. Vexthara, High Curator Lithion, spoke the name like a curse. His entire body blazed with angry red light. "Why do you show yourself now? Have you not brought enough misfortune to our people?" The dark Zephyrian, Vexthara, stopped several meters away from the group. When she spoke, her voice came through Jake's translator as soft and musical, but tinged with sadness. I came only to see the star travelers, Curator. I meant no harm. Your very existence brings harm, another Zephyrian shouted from the crowd that had gathered. The shadow-touched should not be here when we receive honored guests. Jake looked between the two groups, trying to understand what was happening. Hi, Curator. Perhaps you could explain? Lithion's light patterns shifted to what Jake interpreted as embarrassment mixed with disgust. This creature is what you might call a genetic aberration. She appears once every 1,000 cycles among our people. The shadow-touched bring death and misfortune wherever they go. She should be in exile beyond our city, not here contaminating this sacred meeting. Vexthara's head bowed lower, but she made no move to defend herself. Jake noticed that despite her different appearance, she showed no signs of aggression. If anything, she seemed to be trying to make herself smaller, less noticeable. Remove her, commanded another Zephyrian, raising what appeared to be some kind of energy weapon. The star travelers must not be exposed to her curse. Wait, Jake stepped forward instinctively. Something about the situation felt wrong to him. The way Vexthara accepted their hatred without fighting back, the resigned sadness in her posture, it reminded him of stories from Earth's history about scapegoats and persecution. But the armed Zephyrians were already advancing on her. Energy beams lanced out, not to kill, but to drive her away. Vexthara absorbed the attacks without retaliating, slowly backing away from the group dot. As she retreated, her eyes met Jake's for a brief moment. In that instant, he saw not the monster her people described, but someone who had been hurt over and over again. Someone who had given up fighting back because she believed she deserved the treatment she received. Go, Lithion commanded her. Return to the wasteland where you belong. Do not show yourself again while our guests remain. Vexthara nodded once and turned away. Jake watched her disappear into the crystal formations, her dark light fading. Into the distance. Something deep in his chest twisted uncomfortably at the sight. We apologize for that interruption, Lithion said, his colors returning to their previous calm blue patterns. Now, shall we continue with the tour of our city? There is much to show you. But Jake found it difficult to focus on the rest of the day's activities. While Dr. Carter marveled at Zephyrian technology and Ben Rodriguez worked on translation improvements, Jake's mind kept returning to that moment of eye contact with the outcast. The image of her lonely retreat into the wasteland stayed with him. Like a persistent ache, that night, as the human team settled into their assigned quarters within the Crystal City, Jake stared out at the dark formations beyond the city limits. Somewhere out there, Vexthara was alone, exiled by her own people for something she couldn't control. The more Jake thought about it, the more questions arose in his mind. What had she actually done to deserve such treatment? Why hadn't she fought back when attacked? And most importantly, why did her people's explanation of her as a curse-bringer feel so incomplete? As he finally drifted off to sleep, Jake made a decision that would change everything. Tomorrow, he would find answers. He would seek out the shadow-touched Zephyrian and learn her story for himself, regardless of what her people believed about her. Jake slipped out of the Crystal City before dawn, while his teammates still slept in their assigned quarters. The twin suns had not yet risen, leaving the landscape bathed in the soft glow of bioluminescent crystal formations. He carried a basic survival pack and his sidearm, though he hoped he would not need the weapon. The wasteland beyond the city was a maze of broken crystal spires and jagged formations. Unlike the carefully maintained structures within Zephyrian territory, these crystals looked wild and untamed. Some reached toward the sky like grasping fingers, while others lay shattered across the ground in glittering fragments. Jake activated his suit's scanning system to track energy signatures. If Vexthara was out here somewhere, her unique dark energy should show up on his instruments. The readings led him deeper into the wasteland, past formations that grew increasingly strange and twisted. After 2 hours of walking, Jake found what he was looking for. A small shelter had been built into the base of a massive crystal formation, constructed from fallen fragments and held together with some kind of organic binding material. It was crude compared to Zephyrian architecture, but it looked sturdy, enough to protect against the elements. "Hello?" Jake called out softly. "Vexthara? I'm the human from yesterday. I just want to talk." Silence greeted him at first. Then, slowly, a figure emerged from the shelter's shadow. Vexthara looked even more striking away from the crowd of her people. Her dark purple and black energy patterns flowed beneath her translucent skin like liquid night. She was smaller than most Zephyrians Jake had met, but there was something powerful about her presence. "Star Traveler," she said, her translated voice filled with surprise and concern. "You should not be here. My presence brings misfortune to all who come near me." Jake took a careful step closer, keeping his hands visible and non-threatening. "That's what your people said yesterday. But I wanted to hear your side of the story." Vexthara's energy patterns flickered with what looked like confusion. "My side? There is no side to tell. I am shadow-touched. I am cursed. These are facts, known by all Zephyrians since the first cycle." "But what does that actually mean?" Jake pressed. "What makes you different from them, besides your appearance?" For a long moment, Vexthara studied him with those strange, luminous eyes. Then she gestured for him to sit on a flat crystal formation near her shelter. She remained standing, as if ready to flee at any moment. "I was born during the convergence," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "It happens once every 1,000. Cycles when both suns and all 3 moons align in the sky. The ancient texts say that children born during this time are touched by shadow energy, corrupted at the moment of their first breath." Jake listened without interruption, sensing that this might be the first time in years that anyone had asked her to explain herself. "The shadow-touched are blamed for everything that goes wrong," Vexthara continued. "When crops fail, when storms come, when someone dies of old age, it is always our fault. We bring darkness and death wherever we go. This is what every Zephyrian learns from childhood." "How many shadow-touched are there?" Jake asked. "I am the only one alive now," Vexthara replied. "The others died young, either from the hatred of our people or from their own despair. I have lived 30 cycles, longer than any shadow-touched in recorded history." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. 30 years? "You've been alone out here for 30 years? "Not entirely alone," Vexthara said, and for the first time, her energy patterns showed something that might have been pride. "I watch over them, even though they hate me. When dangers come from the deep places, I turn them away. When the ground shakes with dark energy, I absorb it before it can harm the city." "Dark energy?" Jake's scientific training kicked in. "What kind of dark energy?" Vexthara hesitated, then raised one hand. Dark purple energy began to flow around her fingers like liquid smoke. "Our planet sits on vast reservoirs of unstable energy. Sometimes it builds to dangerous levels and seeks release. If left unchecked, it would tear the planet apart." Jake watched in fascination as she manipulated the energy, shaping it into complex patterns before letting it dissipate harmlessly. "And you can control this energy?" "I can absorb it, redirect it, channel it safely away from populated areas," Vexthara explained. "It is the one gift that comes with being shadow-touched. But my people see only the darkness, not the protection it provides." A terrible understanding began to dawn on Jake. "You're not a curse. You're a guardian." Vexthara's energy patterns dimmed. "I tell myself this sometimes, in the long nights. But perhaps I only seek to justify my existence. Perhaps the curse is real, and I simply cannot see it." Jake stood up and took another step toward her. This time, she did not back away. Yesterday, when those energy weapons hit you, why didn't you fight back? You clearly have the power to defend yourself. Because they are right to fear me, Vexthara said simply. Even if I protect them, I am still different, still wrong, still a reminder of darkness in their world of light. The resignation in her voice made Jake's chest tighten with anger. Not at her, but at the system that had convinced her she deserved this treatment. He had seen similar patterns in human history: scapegoating, persecution, the powerful finding someone weak to blame for their problems. Has anyone ever actually proven that you cause bad things to happen? Jake asked. Vexthara considered this. The correlation is clear. When I was young and lived in the city, accidents occurred more frequently. People became ill. The harvest was poor for 3 consecutive cycles. Correlation isn't causation, Jake said. On my world, we learned that lesson the hard way. Sometimes, bad things just happen, and people look for someone to blame because it's easier than accepting that the universe can be random and cruel. Your people have shadow touched among them? Jake thought of Earth's long history of persecution and prejudice. In different ways, yes. We've done terrible things to people who were different, who looked different, who believed different things. It's one of humanity's greatest shamness. Vexthara's energy patterns swirled with something Jake couldn't identify. But you overcame this tendency? We're still working on it, Jake admitted. But we've learned that diversity makes us stronger, not weaker. That the people society rejects are often the ones with the most to offer. They sat in silence for a while, watching the twin suns rise over the crystal formations. Jake found himself studying Vexthara's features more closely. Her energy patterns were hypnotic, flowing in complex spirals and waves. There was a kind of dark beauty to her that was completely unlike her people's bright radiance. Why did you come here? Vexthara asked suddenly. Your people must have warned you about me. Jake considered his answer carefully. Because something felt wrong about yesterday. The way you accepted their treatment, the way you didn't fight back even when you could have. It reminded me of stories from my own world. Stories about good people who were punished for being different. And if you are wrong? If I truly am cursed? Jake met her luminous gaze directly. Then I'll take that risk. But I don't think I'm wrong. Vexthara's entire form seemed to shimmer with surprise. You would risk the curse of the shadow touched for someone you barely know? I've met real monsters in my time, Jake said quietly. They don't usually spend their lives protecting people who hate them. They don't accept punishment without fighting back. They don't build modest shelters in wastelands and live on scraps while channeling dangerous energy away from populated areas. For the first time since he had met her, Vexthara's energy patterns showed something like hope. It was a small flicker, quickly suppressed, but Jake caught it. You speak strangely for a star traveler, she said. Jake smiled. My species has a saying, don't judge a book by its cover. It means you can't know what someone is really like just by looking at them, even if their cover is made of darkness and shadow. Jake looked at her again, really looked at her. The flowing patterns of dark energy, the graceful way she moved, the quiet dignity with which she carried herself despite decades of rejection. Especially then, he said. Sometimes the most beautiful things in the universe are the ones that don't fit into neat, expected categories. Vexthara stared at him for a long moment, her energy patterns cycling through colors Jake had never seen before. Finally, she spoke in a voice so soft he almost missed it. No one has ever called me beautiful. Before human. Jake began visiting Vexthara every morning before his official duties with the diplomatic mission. He brought supplies from the Meridian, food rations, medical equipment, and tools that might make her life in the wasteland more comfortable. At first, she refused his gifts, insisting she didn't deserve such kindness. But Jake's persistence eventually wore down her resistance. "The Star Traveler comes again," Vexthara said one morning as Jake approached her shelter. Her energy patterns had grown brighter over the past week, though she still carried herself with the careful wariness of someone who had learned not to trust good fortune. "I told you to call me Jake," he replied, setting down a pack filled with earth foods he thought she might enjoy. "How are you feeling today?" Vexthara's form flickered with what he had learned was her equivalent of laughter. "Strange. I feel strange. For so long, each day was the same. Absorb the dark energy, maintain the barriers, watch over the city from afar. Now I find myself anticipating your visits." Jake settled onto his usual crystal formation seat. "I'm glad I can brighten your day a little." "That is an interesting choice of words," Vexthara observed. "I am shadow-touched. I bring darkness, not light." "You know, I've been thinking about that," Jake said. "On my world, we've learned that darkness isn't always evil. Night brings rest. Shadows provide shelter from harsh sun. And some of our most beautiful phenomena happen in darkness, like auroras and starlight." Before Vexthara could respond, the ground beneath them began to vibrate with a low, ominous rumble. Her energy patterns immediately shifted to deep purple alert colors. "It comes," she said, rising to her feet with fluid grace. The deep energy builds again. "I must go to the absorption point. Can I come with you?" Jake asked, standing as well. Vexthara looked at him with concern. "It is dangerous for those not touched by shadow. The energy could harm you." "I'll stay back," Jake promised. "I just want to understand what you do." After a moment's hesitation, Vexthara nodded. She led him deeper into the wasteland, toward a formation of crystals that rose like a cathedral from the broken ground. As they got closer, Jake could feel something in the air, a pressure that made his skin crawl and his teeth ache. "There." Vexthara pointed to a series of fissures in the crystal formation. Dark energy was already beginning to seep out like liquid shadow, pooling in the cracks and sending out tendrils that withered everything they touched. Jake watched in amazement as Vexthara approached the fissures without fear. The dark energy seemed to recognize her, flowing toward her outstretched hands like metal drawn to a magnet. She began to absorb it into herself, her entire form blazing with purple-black fire. The process clearly caused her pain. Jake could see her energy patterns strain and flicker as more and more of the destructive force flowed into her body. Her form became almost solid as she struggled to contain the massive amounts of energy, her translucent skin glowing like heated metal. "Vexthara," Jake called out, alarmed by what he was seeing. "Are you all right?" She couldn't respond, too focused on her task to spare energy for speech. Jake watched helplessly as she continued to absorb the dark energy, her body trembling with the effort. Finally, when her form looked ready to burst from the strain, she raised her hands toward the sky and released the energy in a controlled stream that shot harmlessly into space. That the discharge lit up the morning sky like a second sunrise. Jake felt the ground stop shaking. The oppressive feeling in the air dissipated, and the withered areas around the fissures began to show signs of recovery. Vexthara collapsed to her knees, her energy patterns dim and exhausted. Jake rushed to her side, forgetting any concerns about the danger of touching a shadow-touched Zephyrian. "Don't," she whispered weakly. "Residual energy might hurt you." But Jake was already kneeling beside her, offering his water canteen. "You just saved everyone on this planet, didn't you?" "I did what I was made to do," Vexthara replied, accepting the water gratefully. Nothing more. Jake looked back at the crystal formation, then at the city visible in the distance. "Do they know? Do your people have any idea what you just did?" "They." "No, the shaking stopped," Vexthara said. They probably believe their prayers and rituals drove away the dark forces. They do not need to know the truth. The casual way she dismissed her own heroism made Jake's chest tight with emotion. How often does this happen? The small absorptions, every few days. The large ones like this, perhaps once each cycle. There have been 3 events in my lifetime that would have destroyed the planet if left unchecked. Jake did quick math in his head. 3 planetary extinction events. And you stopped all of them. I am shadow-touched, Vexthara said, as if that explained everything. This is my burden. They sat together as she recovered her strength. Jake found himself studying her with new eyes, seeing not an outcast or a monster, but a guardian who had sacrificed everything for people who would never thank her. Jake, Vexthara said suddenly, using his name for the first time. May I ask you something? Of course. Yesterday you said that some of your most beautiful phenomena happen in darkness. What did you mean? Jake thought about how to explain it. Have you ever seen the stars, Vexthara? Really seen them, not just the light pollution from your city? She shook her head. I have lived always near the city, within the glow of our crystal formations. Tonight, Jake said impulsively, let me show you something beautiful that only exists in darkness. That evening, Jake returned to the wasteland with a portable astronomical viewer he had borrowed from Dr. Carter's equipment. He found Vexthara waiting for him near her shelter, her energy patterns showing curiosity mixed with nervous excitement. I have never had a planned activity before, she admitted. In exile, one day flows into the next without variation. Jake set up the viewer and calibrated it to compensate for the planet's atmospheric conditions. On my world, some of our greatest thinkers and artists found inspiration by looking at the stars. There's something about seeing the vast scope of the universe that puts everything into perspective. He adjusted the viewer and stepped back. Look through here. Vexthara approached the device cautiously. When she peered through the eyepiece, her entire form went still. For several moments, she didn't move or speak. I see lights, she whispered finally. So many lights, scattered across the darkness like crystal fragments. Those are suns, Jake explained. Each one potentially warming planets like this one, maybe supporting life we can't even imagine. Vexthara lifted her head from the viewer, her energy patterns swirling with wonder. There are so many. The darkness is not empty at all. That's exactly right, Jake said. Darkness isn't the absence of light. It's the canvas that allows light to shine. Without the darkness of space, we could never see the stars. She looked through the viewer again, this time for much longer. When she finally stepped back, her energy patterns had shifted to colors Jake had never seen before, deep blues and purples that seemed somehow peaceful rather than ominous. On your world, she asked, do you have people who work in darkness, who find beauty there? Jake smiled. Astronomers study the night sky. Deep-sea explorers investigate the dark depths of our oceans. Some of our most beautiful art comes from people who are drawn to shadows and darkness rather than light. And these people are not considered cursed? They're considered essential, Jake said firmly. They see things that people in the light cannot see. They find beauty and truth in places others fear to look. Vexthara was quiet for a long time, processing this information. Finally, she spoke in a voice filled with something Jake had never heard from her before. Hope. Perhaps being shadow-touched is not always a curse, she said slowly. Perhaps sometimes it is simply a different way of seeing the universe. Jake looked at her standing there in the starlight, her dark energy patterns flowing like liquid night against the crystal formations. She was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with conventional standards. Beautiful in her strength, her sacrifice, her willingness to protect others despite their hatred. Vexthara, he said quietly, I need to tell you something. Every morning when I come to visit you, it's not out of pity or duty. I come because spending time with you has become the best part of my day." Her energy patterns flickered with surprise. "But I am shadow-touched, cursed, different." "You're different," Jake agreed. "But different doesn't mean lesser. It just means unique. And in my experience, the most unique people are often the most worth knowing." For the first time since he had known her, Vexthara's energy patterns showed pure, undiluted joy. It was like watching a sunrise, but in reverse, darkness, becoming beautiful rather than light driving it away. Jake was enjoying his morning meal with the diplomatic team when young Kylewin burst into their quarters without ceremony. The Zephyrian's energy patterns blazed with panic and urgency as he struggled to catch his breath. "Star Traveler Jake," Kylewin gasped, his translated voice tight with fear. "You must come quickly. They plan to kill her today." Dr. Carter looked up from her data tablets with concern. "Kill who?" "The shadow-touched one," Kylewin replied. "War Singer Drethmal has convinced others that her presence during your visit has stirred up dark forces. They say she must be cleansed from our world before more misfortune comes." Jake's blood turned to ice. He had been visiting Vexthara for 2 weeks now, bringing supplies and learning about her life. The thought of her facing execution while he sat safely in the city made his stomach clench with rage. "How many are going?" Jake demanded, already moving toward his equipment locker. "A dozen warriors, led by Drethmal himself," Kylewin said. "They left at first light, armed with purification weapons. They will not return until the deed is done." "Ben." Rodriguez grabbed Jake's arm as he strapped on his sidearm. "Jake, you can't interfere in their internal affairs. You'll cause a diplomatic incident." "I don't care," Jake snapped, shaking off his teammate's grip. "They're about to murder an innocent person based on superstition and fear." "We don't know that she's innocent," Alex Thompson pointed out. "We only have your word about what she's really like." Dr. Carter stood up, her expression thoughtful. "Actually, I've been reviewing the seismic data from our sensors. There's been a significant decrease in underground energy disturbances since we arrived. The pattern suggests someone or something has been actively stabilizing the planet's core." "See?" Jake said, heading for the door. "She's not a curse. She's been protecting them." Kylewin followed Jake as he rushed through the crystal corridors toward the city's edge. "Why do you care so much about the shadow-touched?" the young Zephyrian asked. "She is not of your species." Jake paused at the city boundary, looking out at the wasteland where somewhere Vexthara was facing execution alone. "Because someone has to," he said simply. "Because she's spent her whole life protecting people who hate her, and she deserves better." The run to Vexthara's location took Jake 20 minutes across the rough crystal terrain. His heart pounded, with more than just exertion, as he imagined what he might find when he arrived. Would he be too late? Would he find her body cooling among the crystal fragments? But when he reached the familiar area near her shelter, he found a scene that filled him with both relief and fury. Vexthara knelt in the center of the circle of armed Zephyrians, her hands placed palm down on the ground in a gesture of complete submission. The warriors surrounded her with weapons drawn, but none had fired yet. War Singer Drethmal stood directly in front of her, his energy patterns blazing with righteous anger. "Shadow-touched," he intoned, "you have brought corruption to our world with your very existence. The Star Traveler's arrival has awakened dark forces that threaten our people. You will accept purification and cleanse our world of your curse." Vexthara's voice was barely audible. "If my death will bring peace to our people, I accept it willingly." The resigned acceptance in her tone made Jake see red. She wasn't even going to fight back. After everything she had done for them, after all her sacrifices, she was prepared to die because she believed she deserved it. "Stop!" Jake shouted, drawing his sidearm as he charged into the circle. "Anyone who wants to hurt her goes through me first." The Zephyrian warriors spun toward him in surprise. Jake positioned himself directly between Vexthara and Drethmo, his weapon trained on the war singer's center mass. "Star Traveler," Drethmo said, his energy patterns shifting to confused orange. "You do not understand. This creature is a blight upon our world. We must cleanse her corruption before it spreads. The only corruption I see here is a bunch of bullies ganging up on someone who's never hurt anyone," Jake replied, his voice deadly calm. "Vexthara has spent her entire life protecting your city, absorbing dangerous energy that would have killed you all." "Lies," one of the other warriors spat. "The shadow touched bring only death and misfortune." "Jake, no," Vexthara whispered. Behind him, "Please do not endanger yourself from me. They are right to fear what I am." Jake didn't take his eyes off Drethmo, but he spoke to her with gentle firmness. "They're wrong, Vexthara, and so are you if you believe their lies about yourself." The ground beneath them began to vibrate ominously. Jake felt the familiar pressure in the air that he had learned to associate with dark energy buildups. The timing couldn't have been worse. "You see?" Drethmo declared triumphantly. "Her presence awakens the dark forces even now. She must be destroyed before she brings catastrophe upon us all." But Jake had seen Vexthara deal with these energy surges before. He knew what was really happening. "She's not causing this," he said. "She's the only thing standing between you and planetary destruction." The energy buildup was growing stronger by the second. Jake could see cracks forming in the crystal formations around them as dark energy began seeping through fissures in the ground. In the distance, the city's protective shields flickered under the assault. "Vexthara," Jake said urgently, "you need to stop this before it gets worse." "I cannot," she replied, her energy patterns dim with despair. "If I use my abilities, no, they will see it as proof of my corruption. Let the dark energy come. Perhaps my death will appease it." Jake looked at the growing cracks, at the city's failing shields, at the warriors who still believed their superstitions over the evidence in front of them. The energy buildup was accelerating toward critical levels. "Then we'll do it together," he said, holstering his weapon and kneeling beside her. "Jake, no," Vexthara gasped. "The energy will kill you. You are not shadow-touched." "Maybe not," Jake said, taking her hands in his. "But I'm not leaving you to face this alone." Drethmo raised his weapon. "Step away from the corruption, Star Traveler. We will not let you be tainted by her darkness. The only darkness here is your hatred," Jake shot back. "Vexthara, please. Save them, even though they don't deserve it. Show them what you really are." For a moment, Vexthara stared into. 3 days had passed since the confrontation in the wasteland, and the Crystal City buzzed with conversation about what the warriors had witnessed. Jake sat in the diplomatic quarters, writing his final mission report, while Vexthara rested. In the medical bay under Dr. Carter's care, the energy absorption had changed her in ways that were still being discovered. The silver threads in her energy patterns had stabilized, creating a new form of bioluminescence that was neither the bright blues of normal Zephyrians nor the dark purples of the shadow-touched. She was becoming something entirely new. The cellular changes are remarkable, Dr. Carter explained as she reviewed her scans. The energy exchange between you and Vexthara has created a stable hybrid resonance in her bioelectric system. She's still fundamentally Zephyrian, but with completely new capabilities. Jake looked through the medical bay window at Vexthara, who was sleeping peacefully for the first time in decades. "Is she in any danger?" "Quite the opposite," Dr. Carter replied. "She's healthier than she's ever been." The silver energy patterns seem to have healed damage from years of absorbing dangerous energy levels. "If anything, she's stronger now." A soft chime indicated someone was requesting entry to their quarters. Jake opened the door to find High Curator Lithion, accompanied by several other members of the Zephyrian Council. Their energy patterns showed a complex mixture of embarrassment, curiosity, and something that might have been respect. Lieutenant Morrison, Lithion began formally. We have come to discuss the events of 3 days past. Jake gestured for them to enter, though he remained standing. What about them? War singer Drethmal has reported that the Shadow-Touched One saved our city from destruction, another council member said. He claimed she absorbed a planetary-scale energy surge that would have destroyed all life on our world. That's correct. Jake confirmed. She's been doing it for 30 years. You just never bothered to notice. Lethion's energy patterns flickered with shame. We have been reviewing our historical records. There is indeed a correlation between the presence of shadow-touched individuals and the prevention of catastrophic energy events. A correlation you ignored because it was easier to have a scapegoat, Jake said bluntly. Yes, Lithion admitted. We were wrong. Our ancestors were wrong. The shadow-touched are not cursed. They are guardians, born to protect our world from forces we do not understand. Jake felt a surge of satisfaction at the admission, but it was tempered by anger at how long it had taken them to see the truth. And what do you plan to do about it? We wish to offer Vexthara a place of honor in our city, another council member said. A position as guardian of the deep energies, with full recognition of her service to our people. That's very generous, Jake said carefully. But you should probably ask her what she wants. As if summoned by their conversation, Vexthara appeared in the doorway of the medical bay. Her new silver-threaded energy patterns cast beautiful shadows on the crystal walls. As she moved, the council members stepped back instinctively, then caught themselves and tried to appear welcoming. Vexthara, Lithion said, his voice uncertain. We have come to apologize for our treatment of you, and to offer you a new place among our people. Vexthara looked at them with those luminous eyes, her expression unreadable. You offer me acceptance now, after 30 years of exile. Why? Because we were wrong, Lithion said simply. Because you have protected us when we gave you no reason to do so. Because we failed to see your true nature until an outsider showed us what we should have known all along. And if I refuse your offer? The council members exchanged glances. They clearly hadn't expected this possibility. Why would you refuse? You would be honored, respected, given everything that was wrongly denied to you. Vexthara's energy patterns cycled through complex emotions. Because acceptance that comes only after proof of worth is not true acceptance. Because I have learned that there are those who see value in me without requiring demonstrations of power. She moved to stand beside Jake, her silver-threaded patterns resonating with something warm and peaceful. I have spent my life protecting people who hated me. Now I would like to try protecting people who choose to care about me. Jake felt his heart skip a beat. Vexthara, are you saying? I am saying that your offer to take me to the stars still stands. I would be honored to. Accept it, she replied. If your people would welcome a shadow-touched among them, they'll welcome you, Jake said with absolute certainty. And even if some don't at first, they'll learn. We're good at learning, eventually. High Curator Lithion's energy patterns showed deep disappointment. You would leave your homeworld? Leave your people? My people cast me out long ago, Vexthara replied gently. Jake and his crew are the first to show me kindness without expecting anything in return. They are my people now. Dr. Carter stepped forward with a data tablet. Actually, there's something else to consider. The energy resonance between Jake and Vexthara during the absorption event has created a permanent bioelectric link between them. They're essentially bonded now on a quantum level. Jake looked at Vexthara in surprise. Bonded? What does that mean? It means you're connected in ways we're still trying to understand, Dr. Carter explained. Your neural patterns have synchronized. You can sense each other's emotional states, share certain types of energy, and potentially communicate across vast distances. Vexthara's energy patterns brightened with wonder. I can feel him, she said softly. His thoughts, his emotions, the warmth of his spirit. Jake closed his eyes and concentrated. There it was, a gentle presence in the back of his mind, alien but comforting. Vexthara's consciousness, intertwined with his own. I feel it too. This is unprecedented, Lithion said, his scientific curiosity overriding his disappointment. A cross-species quantum entanglement. The implications for our understanding of consciousness and energy manipulation are staggering. Which is why we need to establish a research station here, Jake said, the plan forming in his mind as he spoke. A joint venture between Earth and your people, studying energy phenomena and fostering better understanding between our species. Ben Rodriguez, who had been quietly listening from the corner, stepped forward. I volunteer to head up the communications and cultural exchange programs. And I'll stay to run the geological and energy research, Dr. Carter added. This planet is sitting on discoveries that could revolutionize our understanding of physics. Jake looked at Vexthara, feeling through their new bond her mixture of excitement and nervousness about leaving her world. We don't have to leave forever, he said. We can travel, explore, but always have this place to come back to. A sanctuary, Vexthara said, understanding immediately. A place where shadow-touched and star travelers can work together. More than that, Jake said, his vision expanding. A place where anyone who doesn't fit the normal patterns can find acceptance. Where being different is celebrated instead of feared. High Curator Lithion considered this proposal. A research station would bring great honor to our world. And perhaps it would help us learn to see beyond our old prejudices. There's one condition, Jake said firmly. Any shadow-touched who are born in the future get full support and education from day one. No more exiles, no more scapegoating. Agreed, Lithion said immediately. We will establish new protocols based on what we have learned. As the council members prepared to leave, Lithion approached Vexthara one final time. I know our words cannot undo 30 years of wrong treatment. But please know that you will always have a place of honor here if you choose to return. Vexthara's energy patterns showed forgiveness mixed with sadness. I know, High Curator, and perhaps someday I will visit. But for now, I need to discover who I am when I am not defined by others' fears. That evening, Jake and Vexthara stood together on the observation deck of the Meridian, watching the twin suns set over the crystal landscape. Tomorrow they would depart for Earth, beginning a journey that would take them across the galaxy. Are you nervous? Jake asked, feeling her emotional state through their bond, but wanting to hear her thoughts. Terrified, Vexthara admitted, but also excited. For the first time in my life, I am choosing my own path instead of simply accepting what others believe I deserve. Jake reached out and took her hand, marveling at how the silver threads in. Her energy patterns responded to his touch. You know, when I first saw you, I thought you were the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Even though I was shadow-touched? Because you were shadow-touched, Jake corrected. Because you were unique. Because you carried yourself with such dignity, despite everything you'd been through. Because you sacrificed everything for people who gave you nothing in return. Vexthara's entire form seemed to glow with happiness. And now? Jake looked at her, really looked at her. The flowing silver and purple energy patterns, the graceful way she moved, the quiet strength that had sustained her through decades of loneliness, and now the hope that made her luminous in an entirely new way. Now I think beauty is too small. A word, he said. You're magnificent. Through their bond, he felt her joy resonate with his own, creating a harmony that seemed to make the very air around them shimmer. As the last light faded from the crystal city below, Jake realized that he had